Chapter 6, Organizing and Outlining Your Speech. In this chapter, we'll look at organization and why it's necessary and valuable for your speeches, different types of organizational pattern, and how to choose the most logical for your speech purpose, constructing an outline and connective statements within that to make everything flow really well within your speech. Why do we need organization in speeches? Keep in mind that we can only hold so many things in our brain. So you want to make sure to limit the information that you provide in your speech to ensure that you get the most bang for your buck for the information that you do provide. A big part of that is not piling on too many main points for your audience. A rule of thumb is 3 to 5 main points. Because in this class, you do have time limits for each assignment, I would recommend sticking with the 3 main points for each of your speeches due in this course. So keep in mind that you want to make sure that you provide good, solid main points, that you are able to build and have sufficient information for each of those main points. Categories of information should be distinct, different, and clear. And you will appear more credible when you have a clearly organized and well-developed presentation, that the 3 main points are extremely easy to follow, and each main point is well supported with your information. So the importance of grouping, you'll find patterns and connections of data and research. You'll avoid having too many points in your speech, no more than 3 to 5. And we talked about in this course, let's try to focus on 3. Chunk into 5 or fewer numbers of main groups or main ideas. Again, we'll focus on 3 for this class. And organized speakers gain credibility, and audience will understand what you have to say, and retain that information better. So organizational patterns for informative speeches. The first one we'll talk about is chronological order. So this term should be familiar to you. You know that chronology means time. So if your speech is organized by chronological pattern, then it's the time events occurs. This is highly used in a highly used organizational structure. It refers to time order, and it can be used for short or long-term time. So for instance, if you were to give a demonstration speech, that's not something we do in this class, but if you were to give a demonstration speech and you were going to explain to your audience the steps of a process, those would be short-term times. You would go through each step of the process and explain to your audience how to get to the end result. Now, long-term would be consider like if you're going to give a speech about a person's life, you might talk about childhood, education, career, or early life, adult life, and later in life. So it would be the span of time. You also, if you're going to give a speech maybe about a battle, a war, you might base that on chronology. Spatial is probably not something you're going to use. It refers to movement in space or direction, like maps or layouts or layers. So it must be presented logically. Think about the weather report on the news. If you go into a field like marketing or advertising and you're wanting to tell how a campaign has impacted different regions, you might approach that in a spatial manner. Topical is probably what you're going to do the most. It's pretty appropriate for most all of your speech topics. It's where you can organize concepts like types, kinds of varieties, categories, or parts. And you would make sure you have like the strongest topic in the beginning, your first point and or last point. Middle points get lost sometimes, so make sure to bookend with your strongest points. But think about topic, it's just how it logically makes sense. This is a logical way to organize this. Cause and effect refers to speeches about causes and their origins of the cause, the source of the cause, the results, and the consequences. So for persuasive organizational patterns, you might give a problem solution. You would explain the problem, convince your audience of the best solution. Now, similarly is problem, cause, solution. But in this case, you would say the problem, this is what the cause is of the problem, and this is how to solve it. And then Monroe's motivated sequence. It follows specific patterns of attention, need, solution or satisfaction, visualization, and action. I think a lot of times about some of our commercials that we see on TV, especially kind of the longer ones. For instance, take a proactive commercial, for instance. And so attention, how do they get your attention? Well, sometimes it's a celebrity. Sometimes it's someone who has a very bad case of acne, and that gets your attention. Need, okay, this is my need. This is where I've had breakouts on my face. This is clearly what I have a need for. Solution, I bought proactive. I use proactive. Now look at my face now. It's so clear, visualization. And then finally, action is buy this, and this is going to be the result of it. So I think we see a lot of times Monroe's motivated sequence in advertising, but I think anytime you're talking about policy, some political type topics, Monroe's motivated sequence is a very helpful organizational pattern. Additional organization principles, main points must be relatively equal in emphasis, value, and time spent. I find that this is something I write really often on feedback sheets, is that main points aren't always balanced. It's very important to support each main point equally. Sometimes it's really obvious that you ran out of information for a point and they're not balanced, they're not equal. So make sure that when you're developing your speeches, that each main point is equal in balance, time spent, value, and your focus is equal. You can use more than one organizational pattern, one for main points, one for subpoints. I don't know that I'd recommend that. That might get a little complicated, but you can do it. Use full sentences and parallelism. Make sure others can understand your points. So your main points should all be in complete sentences. You can model your language so that that is repetitive, and it makes it much easier for your audience to follow. Excuse me. So the order of speech development, you create the body of your speech first. Then you create your introduction, conclusion, and connectives or transitions. So connectives or transitions. Connectives are the ways that you link everything in your speech. I have a lot of students are resistant to use these, but I'm telling you, this is what makes things so much easier for your audience to follow what you're saying. It gives a lot more impact to your speech when your audience can clearly tell where you're going and where you've been. So, for instance, there are phrases or sentences that connect parts of the speech and show relationships between them. Perform a number of functions. They remind your audience where you've been. They forecast where you're going. They're explaining the logical progression of your presentation, and they keep your audience's attention. So types of connectives are also often interchangeable. Internal summaries or previews emphasize what was just covered and what is coming up. Transitions, now that we have talked about X, let's look at Y. Signpost, first, second, next, last. I find this is something students are really resistant to doing, but it's so important. It makes it so much easier to follow where you are in your speech. So you can connect all of these things. Bridging statements psychologically moves the audience through the speech. So think about if you're giving a speech and you're talking about a person's life. So first, we're talking about Franklin Delano Roosevelt's childhood. And then you talk about the childhood. And then you're ready to go to your second point. And you would say, now that we have discussed his childhood, let's next move forward and look at his education. So you're telling your audience where you've been, and you're telling your audience where you're going. Guidelines on connectives. They are only to connect, not provide evidence. Sometimes your subpoints may need them. They might be a sentence or two. You probably want more than just one or two words. You should plan for them and not ad lib. So it's important when you're writing your outline, work your transitions in that outline so that you are very clear when you're giving your speech. If you think you're going to ad lib them, sometimes we get kind of lost in the shuffle of giving a speech and they get them left out. I do want them in your outline. Vary them. Don't have to use the same thing each time, not the same one each time. I always tell students that use next all the time. Well, next doesn't tell me where you are in your speech. It just tells me you're going to the next thing. So when you start every main point with next, that's never telling me exactly where you are in your speech. So outlining. I in this course will give you samples on outlining expectations. Outlining is the blueprint of what you will present. It's the plan for practicing and giving the speech. A lot of times students will say because you will only turn an outline into me, and they'll say, well, what about my essay? Well, I don't want you to write an essay. I want you to have a really good detailed outline, but I don't want every word that you say word for word on a piece of paper typed out. When you do that, you tend to read that, and that's not what a speech is about. Your outline should be detailed. It should have the majority of your information on there, and that's what you use to practice. But I don't want anything in paragraph form. I do not want an essay. I want a detailed outline, and there are samples in our course that detail what that expectation looks like. There are two types of outlines. There are prep outline and there are speaking outlines, note cards. So for this class, you're going to turn in the preparation, the blueprint outline, and how you approach the speaking outline on note cards. I'm going to leave that up to you. So more to consider. Listen to a speech by a professional speaker, such as a TED Talk, and see if you can detect their structure and use of transitions. If you have any questions, let me know. In our course, with each presentation, there are sample outlines that detail what the expectation is for that assignment. I hope this helps you, and I really want to impress upon you the importance of organization. Sometimes we spend a lot of time researching. We spend a lot of time preparing, but we don't present that information in a way that's easy for the audience to follow. Good, solid organization is the key to that. Having good, solid connectives as you present that information is key. And I hope this information will help you as you begin the outlining and speech writing process.